So you're an American defense contractor, like Raytheon or Lockheed Martin. Let's get something very clear. You are in the business of violence. And the business model is simple. The more war, the more conflict, the more revenue. You make billions of dollars selling your state-of-the-art weapons to countries all over the world. But let's be honest, these past couple years, business has been down. At the height of the Cold War and the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan, contracts for revolutionary and expensive aircraft and weapon systems were flooding in every second. So you were swimming in money. But then the Soviet Union collapsed and things changed. Suddenly the world got peaceful. And sure, the war on terror brought you a boost in sales, but it was nothing like your Cold War glory days. Not to mention, with the Soviet Union gone and all this new global cooperation, countries like China, Russia, and pretty much all of Eastern Europe started taking some of your market share. During the Cold War, buying weapons from the Soviet Union or Red China was unthinkable. They were the enemy. But after 1991, that all changed. Suddenly, it wasn't anti-American to buy guns and ammo from Russia or Eastern Europe anymore. They were affordable and reliable. You lost your monopoly on a market you used to dominate. Long story short, by the early 2000s, life as a defense contractor sucked. You're making chump change compared to just 10 years ago, and you're desperate to get back to the good old days when your products were the only ones being bought. But if you're ever gonna get back to the top again, if you're ever gonna make real money again, you're gonna have to find a way to force countries to buy your weapons no matter how much you charge for them. You gotta find ways to make them buy from you even though they're not at war. And the best way to do that? NATO expansion, of course. It's simple. You see, NATO started out as a military alliance against the Soviet Union, but when the Soviet Union finally collapsed, NATO was left without a real purpose. But instead of fading into the background, it came out swinging and placed itself at the forefront of what's called European cooperation. Countries could join NATO and benefit from a long list of shared services, security, and trade. And all they had to do was promise to only buy weapons from certain manufacturers. Spoiler alert, most of those manufacturers are American. And the reasoning actually makes sense. If we're gonna be in a military alliance, we should all have the same standardized gear, weapons, and ammo. That way, if war did break out, American soldiers and their European counterparts have all been trained on the same gear, with the same weapons, the same ammo calibers, the same expensive armored vehicles, the same fighter jets, and so forth. So the more NATO expands, the more countries that join NATO for safety from Russia or China or whatever, the more you stand to make because they all have to buy from you. So obviously, as an American defense contractor, you are incentivized to get as many countries to join NATO as possible. And luckily, we're here to take you through every step you need to become a NATO war profiteer. My name is Jake Tran, and we make documentaries on money, power, war, and crime so that you can see the world for what it really is. A giant game of acquiring power. You can't get out of this game either way, so instead of being a victim, why not learn to be a better player? Your parents, teachers, friends, society will never teach you any of this, so we're going to. Stay dangerous, and this is how to profit from NATO expansion. One country that's increasing its defense spending right now is Japan, because of the China threats, which makes American war profiteers drool from their mouths. Japan is the world's 12th largest arms importer, and most of what it buys comes from America. That's why in July, Reuters reported that Raytheon was already lobbying Japan to ditch Lockheed Martin to buy their $300 million radar systems instead. Lobbying money well spent if the deal goes through. And I learned all of this from this super informative newsletter called The Daily Upside. The Daily Upside is a free, yes completely free business and investing newsletter founded by a team of financial professionals that over 750,000 people subscribe to. What sets the Daily Upside apart from other free newsletters is that their stories are short and sweet enough to where you're able to get the latest information fast every single morning, but it's not too short to where you're not getting any useful insights, just like the Japan defense spending story I shared with you. And there's none of the BS you get with mainstream media. I personally love the Daily Upside, and sometimes I even get video ideas from the stories they cover. And the best part is that again, it's free, so you should definitely pause the video and sign up for free right now with the link below. It takes like 10 seconds to sign up and you have nothing to lose. Pause the video and click the link below now. Thanks to the Daily Upside for sponsoring this video.
If President Milosevic will not make peace, we will limit his ability to make war.
As an American defense contractor, war is where you make the most of your money. In peacetime, countries usually have long, relaxed schedules when it comes to ordering and actually paying for weapons and equipment. Some of these contracts can last years, and that means you don't really get one big payday. Instead, you get paid in tiny installments over a massive period of time. Not ideal. But during war, most of your regular customers are so anxious, under so much pressure, that they're begging you to send them everything you've got as quickly as possible. America spends over $800 billion on its military every year. That's almost as much as Saudi Arabia's entire GDP. In comparison, the second biggest military spender in the world is China, standing at around $290 billion a year, less than half of what America spends. So it's no surprise that war is when the potential for big money really appears. And although you'll deny it till the day you die, you like war. You need war. War is when you're at your peak, but that's not all. Because if war is brewing and your cards fall just right, Russia will inevitably get involved. And that's when the dollars really start flowing in. Because once Russia picks a side in a fight, you can bet the other side will be running to NATO to ask for help. Russia is like the big bad bully in the schoolyard, and NATO is that one strict teacher that always knows how to put the bully back in their place. By joining NATO, countries all over the world can hide behind their big bad members like America and Western Europe and avoid being obliterated. Before Russia invaded Ukraine, only 20 to 30% of people in Finland wanted their country to join NATO. Now, that number sits at over 70%. That's why none of America's defense contractors ever seem worried about messing up the world's relationship with Russia or provoking conflict all over Europe. Because one way or another, you know conflict is going to add to your bottom line.
Now, there are some in Congress, maybe my friend is included in that, who think that it's acceptable to give this administration a blank check to continue these endless wars.
The possibility of war, especially war with Russia, is naturally going to make countries run to NATO for safety and security. But for an ambitious defense contractor like yourself, that's just not enough. You want to milk every conflict for everything it's worth. Because who knows? Once war ends and things get quiet, it could be years before another conflict explodes. Years before you get to expand your customer base. So to make the most of the benefits NATO offers, you have to go on a lobbying campaign like no other. Basically, you have to donate money to American politicians in the hopes that they'll see things your way, wink wink. In the 7 years after the Soviet Union collapsed, defense contractors spent over $32 million on lobbying Congress members and candidates. In comparison, the tobacco industry, one of the biggest and most evil industries when it comes to lobbying and propaganda, only spent around $26 million in the same time period. Now they'll say that not all of that lobbying cash was spent to encourage NATO expansion, but it was definitely their biggest ask. And that's not all. Once you're pouring money into American government's officials' pockets to encourage NATO expansion, you have to hit them on the emotional front too. Remember, logic stirs the audience, and emotion wins people's hearts. You have to make the American government feel guilty for not doing enough. For not preparing for a war with Russia that you, in your expert opinion, know is coming. Accuse the Pentagon of ignoring the fact that, quote, Russian aggression is on NATO's doorstep, end quote. Make them think Russia's every move is a sign of impending conflict. That way, the American government will think the only safe move is to push for more countries to join NATO, while the rest of Europe will be lining up to be the first ones accepted into the group. Then all you have to do is go one step further and remind the world and NATO that the only way to counter their big bad neighbor to the east is with massive military spending, which you'll be very happy to help them out with.
We have reached today an important decision in good cooperation between the government and the President of the Republic. We hope that the Parliament will confirm the decision to apply for NATO membership during the coming days.
Once the world agrees the only way to keep the peace is by expanding NATO, that's when your marketing team needs to step in with the big guns. Literally. Be like Tony Stark and go to the guys in power and show them just how good, how cutting edge, how state-of-the-art your weapons really are. The American government, NATO, and American defense contractors already have a symbiotic relationship. so it won't take long for them to add your list of products and services to their requirements. You see, joining NATO isn't just as easy as filling in an application form and waiting to be approved. It takes a lot of work from the countries who want to join. They have to make policy changes, sometimes they have to change some of their laws. But the requirement you're the most concerned with is the mandatory military upgrades and spending. To get in and stay in, each NATO hopeful has to spend at least 2% of its GDP on its military and defense abilities. And that's where the big money really comes from. Take Denmark, for example. Its GDP in 2021 was nearly $400 billion. As part of NATO, it has to spend at least $8 billion of that income on its military. And Finland, the NATO hopeful where 70% of the population now wants to join the organization? Well, if they want to get in, they'll have to start spending at least $6 billion of their $300 billion GDP on weapons and military expansion too. Finland has already ordered 64 warplanes that cost over $110 million each just to have a better chance at finally being let into NATO. And who are the preferred manufacturers of NATO weapons and military products? American defense contractors, of course. Just this year, Estonia and Norway bought $1.5 billion worth of weapons from American military contractors. Just imagine the profit potential if all of Europe joined NATO. A good chunk of that newfound military spending will automatically flow into your pocket. And the best thing yet, even if countries are too poor to afford your expensive weapons and military equipment, that's not a problem at all, because the American government offers a quick and easy solution: military aid.
Have approved $40 billion.
The Senate passed a $40 billion.
President Biden today signing a bipartisan $40 billion military and humanitarian aid package into law.
Right now, Ukraine's government is hemorrhaging money all over the place. They have refugees to feed, soldiers to train, infrastructure to rebuild, and massive military spending to support. And let's face it, sometimes there just aren't enough dollars to go around. Which sucks if you're a defense contractor looking to make big bucks from the war. Luckily, the American government always looks after its own. So, to help Ukraine fight back and help NATO member countries expand their militaries even when they don't have enough money to do it themselves, America will offer them military aid. Plus, in 1996, defense contractor lobbyists actually convinced the government to guarantee NATO and prospective NATO countries loans for defense purchases. Just this year, the American government has spent more than $40 billion on one single war package to Ukraine. But these war and aid packages aren't handouts. They're loans, forced loans. Ukraine can't choose what it wants to do with the money or what weapons it needs, but it'll have to pay for it all anyway. Do you know what that means? That means you get a forced customer thanks to your big brother, which is just another great example of how the American government looks out for its defense contractors while still making itself out to be the good guy. The American plebs cover the costs of the aid packages through taxes, and American defense contractors get paid for the weapons they so graciously provide. And in the end, the country being helped out gets to spend decades trying to pay back a loan it was forced to take. Even though American defense contractors didn't make as much money from the war on terror, there were still many people that got filthy rich off of it. But here's something you may not know. The war on terror and all the worst terror events of the last few decades can all be traced back to one culprit. And that culprit is America. See, in 1953, the CIA changed the history books. They overthrew the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh. Because as you probably guessed, Mossadegh got in the way of American and British profits. At first, it looked like the most successful CIA operation ever. But little did they know that this one small act of aggression, this one coup, would be the first domino, the first butterfly that would lead to some of the worst acts of terror in history, and arguably, a lot of the conflict between America and the Middle East today. Here's the thing though. A public video that goes into all the details of Iran and acts of terror would definitely get demonetized right away. So instead, we've released an exclusive private documentary on the Iran coup that's only available to members of this channel. All you have to do to get access to our video on CIA black sites, as well as loads of other topics like our latest one on the connection between Victoria's Secret and everyone's favorite private island owner, Jeffrey Epstein, is to hit the join button below. People spend years of their life and tens of thousands of dollars to attend university, only to leave not knowing anything about how the world really works. But by becoming a member, you'll get access to all this insider info for only $5 a month. And trust us, it's way more entertaining than university lectures. And there's a refund policy too, unlike most YouTube memberships. So if you join and you don't think it's worth it, email us within your first month of joining for the first time and we will personally refund you for your first month. After your first month, there is no refund.
Don't you just love some good old war profiteering? But in all seriousness, do you know how everyone in this world is pretty much after power, but everyone is afraid to admit it? Well, that is the point of this channel. We make documentaries on money, power, war, and crime so that you can learn from these power games instead of becoming a victim to it. So if that sounds interesting to you, click that subscribe button below. We make multiple videos just like this one every single week for free, so you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. But that is gonna wrap it up. Thanks for being part of the Watch the End Club. Stay dangerous out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.